Hey guys, this is my next tutorial in the Devise mini-series that I'm doing for Let's Build with Ruby on Rails and then extending Devise series. So I wanted to touch on this stuff because they do have a lot of help documentation, but I've never seen really much video content out there in the wild, and I've run into where I need some of these features that Devise just doesn't have out of the box when building a Rails app. So I'm going to walk you through some of those features. Some have already been covered, so I think this might be the third or fourth installment. Forgive me if that number is wrong, but I'm going to continue this, and it seems to be just short, quick tips that can extend the gem itself that are kind of no nonsense, but some that require a little more oomph to get going. So in this video, I'm going to talk about extending the sign-in form to either allow a username or an email as a login. So the email is the default typically in a Rails app using Devise. So they kind of just stick with email and password to start with. But what if you wanted just a username to actually include that concept too? So you can just direct the user to provide either, which is kind of nice because people are forgetful and sometimes they remember the username or sometimes they don't. And then they have that email as a fallback. So let's get started. I'm going to create a new Rails 6 app. This is still in beta, Rails 6, but I'm using it and it's been great so far. So I think the real official 6 version should be out in a few weeks at the time of this recording. I am going to reference my kickoff Tailwind template, and the catch with that is if you already haven't, it has a extension on Devise already that includes a username and a name field. So those are two things you would need to add to make this work, particularly the username. So I'll walk you through that in a second if you don't already have it, but my kickoff template should get you going. Okay, so I'll kick off a new app. I'm going to use that kickoff template as I said. So Rails new, then I'll call this Devise email or username, just so it's clear what we're doing here. And I'm going to pass that template through. I'm in my sites directory already, so this is a relative path to the kickoff folder that I have already in that folder. So it's going to be kickoff Tailwind and then pass the template explicitly to the RB. So where this is at is I'm creating a new app in a sites folder, and inside that folder is already the kickoff template folder called kickoff Tailwind, and then within that is the actual template I'm going to pass. In this folder are some dependencies relative to this template, so when I run this it'll go and grab those and create the new app willingly. So the -m here means pass this template when you create a new Rails app. So let's go ahead and fire that off. It's going to install quite a few dependencies as well as Yarn and some node modules, so we'll wait for that to finish up and then we'll get going. So we generated the app. It took a little bit there, but a lot was done for us, which is the great thing about using that template. I really recommend it if you want to just kind of hit the ground running, but if you don't understand these concepts, it might make sense to configure the gems and stuff that I use yourself. I did previous videos, I think, talking about the template itself, so you might check my archive on YouTube or my blog. So I'll cd into that folder now, and I think I can just tab through it, and we'll run Rails server. And we should be able to boot up. See, I'm running Rails 6 RC2, so we're really close to the final release. So that should be awesome when it's finally out. I'll have to update my course and everything else I'm using Rails with, which shouldn't be too bad. Okay, so here's the basic template. It's nothing special, but if you look, Devise is already installed. I have it kind of styled using Tailwind. Tailwind is a CSS framework for utility-first CSS. It's an approach that's more, I would say, scalable in terms of CSS. It's not for everyone, so you can either bypass that or create a new Rails app on your own and go like a bootstrap route or something like that. Totally fine. The difference here, as you can see, what I said before, is I've already added a username and name field to my Devise extended version. Automatically, by default, it only comes with password and password confirmation when signing up, and then login will only accept email or password, and this is actually true today to this template, so I can't accept a username or email at this point, but that's what we want to add. So to kick that off and to go about that in such a way, we need first, if you haven't already, you need to go ahead and add that migration to add username to Devise. at least. I've added name too, but you don't necessarily need that field to do this. So why don't I open this project in our editor? I think I should go into that. Yeah, code. So open this up, I think in a new window. There we go. If you haven't, like I said, you would want to run a migration to add username. Since I've already added it, we have it in our schema already. But if you don't, if you do Rails generate migration, you could say like add username to users, and then create a username field and make it a string field, base field. So that running this would know to add this to the users table, which already should exist if you've installed Devise from this point, which you definitely need to do before you run this. And then this will extend that to add to the users table. And then you need to just update your controller where I have it like this. Like I said, check out the docs if you've never done this, but you need to configure those new parameters as you see here. So username and name, and the same is true for when you do an update on the account itself too. So this is for sign up and edit in particular. So those two things need to happen, and then you can add that to your database and then update your views accordingly if you have those. So those I already have in this template, and in like registrations, edits, you notice I have username and name now, which is pretty helpful to get that to work. So those things are required now. So with that process done, sorry if that was quick to kind of go over that, but I'm already got that concept done. I've done that in other videos too, so definitely check those out. At this point, we need to extend our model a bit to accept this new username or email concept. So to do that, we need to do a bit of Ruby to create what's known as a adder accessor. And this is kind of a shorthand method that generates a getter and a setter is what they call it. It's basically just a shorthand in Ruby for classes, since you use it so often, to create these methods under the hood that automatically you would use other places. So what that looks like is this. I'm going to add it at the top. I'm going to call it login since we want it to be not email or username. And I'll go through just make some comments like, so a typical getter might do this. You make a method and you pass like, okay, login creates that instance variable. So you have it to work with in other places, in your controllers or your views. And this is getting generated partially by this. And then the setter allows you to do other actions using this. So we could say def login, and you can pass in like a new, if I can type, it can be whatever value you want to pass through. So in this case, a string, since it is a string. Inside the block, we can have the @login equals the string, so whatever you pass it. So in practice, this might look like user dot name or login in this case. You could set it to, you know, Andy@example.com, or you could say user dot login, and it should return that as well in this case. So we have that get and set concept nailed down with just passing this. So that allows us to bypass these two methods and kind of clean up reviews, or model, I should say. So hopefully that makes a little sense. Ruby is a whole paradigm to get great at. I'm still in that boat. Like, I want to get even better, but I think I know enough to be deadly. As with anything, it just takes practice. All right, so with this initialized, we can go ahead and modify our, if you recall, in our controllers, we have that permitted parameters for Devise. So these are going to get a little longer in what we pass through, since we're going to update a new method coming up in the model that's going to do a bit more querying to get the data we need back. So we're going to add one as well. So we have sign up and account update. And since we're going to kind of pay attention to sign in, we need to add that as well. But this is going to be, yeah, sign in. Maybe we'll do sign up first. just to get it in order. Cool. So sign up is going to require our username, our email, since we created that username. So we've got username. We can pass in name too if you want. I'm going to go ahead and I think remove that. I don't know that I need it. Actually, I'll keep it there since we already have it. We need to permit that anyway to save. Otherwise, it will not save. So on top of sign up, we can add email. We've got password. And then password confirmation. Okay, so we need to extend this to include this stuff now, just to kind of make sure it does save. So the sign in method, we need to add login now instead of the other parameters, because we're going to accept this new attribute in the view. It's kind of going to do a build method that creates that username or email concept. So password in this case. Password confirmation. And then finally on account update, we can pass in username, name, email, password, confirmation, and current password. So when you go to edit your account, if you've used Devise before, you need to pass in your current password to go ahead and save it. It's kind of a security protocol there. Okay, this in theory should allow us to permit these parameters and then initially save that new data to the database if you do create, sign in, or update your account. So that's part of the equation. Next, we need to add a method in, or a configuration in our Devise initializer, which gets generated when you install the gem. Here, I'm going to go ahead and change the example email just to something shorter. Definitely want to update that regardless though at some point if you're using this in production. And then right here, there's this big long comment about any authentication. You can choose to update this to and configure it to whatever you want to log in with. The default here is email, but since we've made that new method in our model, we're going to use login. So it allows us to use both the username and email. So just doing that should configure Devise to at least accept that new attribute. And then when you do modify that initializer, we're going to have to restart our server. So I'll do that in a second. But let's go ahead and create what we need now to do that query in the model so we can hook into Devise again. So this is going to be kind of a lengthy method, but it's going to hook into the Devise gem and nudge it in such a way to allow us to have both the username or email. So it's going to be find for database authentication. And then we can pass in warden conditions as like a parameter. Devise uses warden under the hood. It's kind of another gem Ruby concept for authentication and session stuff. So conditions will be warden conditions. We can type .dupe, and then login is equals conditions dot delete login. Query the conditions using the where clause, and then another where we can do lower, a little advanced querying. Pass in that username attribute we've added, and then we'll say if it's equal to the value, or this is actual SQL we're writing, so lower email equals value. Now the lower methods here don't necessarily need to be here if you're using raw MySQL as your database, but maybe something like Postgres or something else, you would need to have that so everything's lowercase when it goes into the data layer. Okay, so then value, we need a hash here. So let's say value equals login.strip.downcase, and I think I forgot a bracket in the mix there. Yeah, it should be right here before there, and then one, and then we just get the first record there, or the first record that comes back. I think that looks good. So this is going to hook into the Devise authentication, basically in the data layer level. that is already the email concept first, but we're adding that login at our accessor. So it's going to depend on adding those fields in this case to that value. So we can say either username equals the value or email equals the value. So it allows us to extend it. So hopefully that makes sense. And sorry if I'm not explaining it that well. Okay, so we're almost there. On top of this, we've permitted our params. We go into our views is next. And the main one we want to update is the sessions. So you can go into this field. If you're using this kickoff template, I have an email-based text field. We want to change that to a text field in this case because it's not going to be email. But we need to change this to login instead. And we could probably get rid of the autocomplete portion. And in our, if you haven't, registration's new, you would want to add your username field here. That allows you to update that accordingly. So you can update both the username and email in this case here, the same as with the edit. So when you're creating a new account, you need to pass both things. If you're logging in, you can pass in one or the other. Oh, one extra thing. So on the label field, we can pass in what that label should be or login, and you can use that inside the config locales folder. I haven't talked much about this, but it allows you to either translate data or whatever on the fly. Devise comes with its own set of presets, so you can change these, and this is where you would do that. This is kind of a standard when you want to kind of implore data that could be either English or Spanish, whatever you provide here. So in our English file, there's some defaults and some guides on how to actually render this, say in your view, and this is a way to do so. I won't go into too much detail there, but we need to set up this to extend what we just added in our user layer based on the active record model. So we've got EN, I can't speak, active record, and white space matters here, so be sure to pay attention to that. So a lot of indentation. We go to the user model, login, since we've added that adder accessor, and then username or email. So all this is doing is basically updating this label field to say username or email relative to what's in this file. And again, we need to restart our server for this to take effect, since usually most things in the config directory require a restart. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I'll head back to the page, users sign up. Everything looks normal, but notice username or email is now in our login form. I don't have an account yet, so I'll go ahead and create one. Just say Andy Leverance, Web Crunch, if I can type. So I'll sign up. If all goes right, we signed up successfully. Okay. One quirk I don't have in my template is kind of an if user signed in method here. So I'm going to go ahead and add that real quick. That's kind of just a way you can extend the application layout. So that's going to be in the views application layouts. I need to update this to just include it. It's kind of funny I don't. But essentially, we're going to do a if user sign in. We're going to render like a log out link, and then we could say else render these links, which is basically if you're logged out. So then we need to end that block. And apologies if this looks messy. So we've got this. I'll indent these one. If we're signed in, I want a log out link, so I'll say link to log out, and we'll say destroy user session path. That's part of Devise path helpers. And then within that, we'll just pass these classes as well. So one quirk with this destroy path is it's expecting a method delete. So it would be like so, instead of just a direct URL, because that's just kind of how it works with the RESTful routing. And okay, so with that, maybe we'll go one step further and add a just kind of like you're signed in as. So I'll just add like a p tag, and I'm using Tailwind here, so just can add some randomness here. So on the large size, we'll do margin right of 2, px4, give it some depth. And then you can just say like welcome current user dot username. I did forget, I think, to do item center here. Yeah. So if I'm logged in, whoops. Oh, I need another end, I think. Link to, if, oh, should probably do an if. There we go. There we go, cool. So now my username's saved. I can't type, welcome spelled wrong, welcome. Yay, okay, cool. So for you to log out, we'll go back to the home page. It's kind of the default for Devise. You could change that too. I'll probably cover that coming up. But logging in, now we could say, okay, if you recall, my username was just a lever. I'll try that and sign in. Cross my fingers, it works, cool. And then if we do email, I'll log in again with Andy at WebCrunch. Sweet. So as you can see, that's pretty nifty. That's kind of a common practice you see in a lot of apps out there too. So it's probably worth it to implore if you find a lot of people coming to your site and always visiting. They're going to forget things. And you know, you want to be that app that doesn't piss people off. So that is the quick guide on how to use a username or email in setting up your Devise sign up system and or login system. So hopefully that was helpful. I'm going to use this probably from, you know, ongoing because I find it pretty useful. It seems like a feature that just should be probably come by default, to be honest, but not everyone wants a username field, so that makes sense too. So if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to leave them in the comments, whether it's on my blog or the YouTube channel. And from then on, I appreciate your support. All right, guys, talk to you soon. Peace. Hello Rails is my new course on Ruby on Rails. I'll teach you Ruby on Rails from the ground up. Visit hellorails.io for more information.